Hello, and welcome to this discussion on citing images using APA 6th. The publication manual talks about audiovisual media in Chapter 7, beginning on page 209. You can also look to the Guide to Electronic References, and I would pay particular attention to entry number 52. That's what I used as a guide. But I also used other pages, and so I try to reference them on some of the slides, but I want to first talk about citing images within a journal article. So if you found this particular image on the right, you can see it's from page 171, and it's in this article. You have to ask yourself how you used it. So if you used it just by referencing it, talking about it, much in the way you talk about an article's verbiage and you paraphrase it, well, then you're just going to do the same and make an in-text citation. So here you can see I have the author, the year, but then I make reference to the specific part of the source. Okay, so that's the key difference here. Then when it comes time to include it in your references list, you're going to cite the whole entire journal article in journal article format. So there's nothing to question here. This is very straightforward. This is what you do. If you find an image on a website, and in this case I took an image from Radiopedia. I used the basic format, author, year, title of image format, and then where I got it from. So the retrieved from the URL. Or in this case I put a DOI. And here's why. Radiopedia supplies both, and if you have a DOI, then I would use a DOI. But here we have the creator, the date, the title is in sentence case, and it's italicized. The format is what kind of image is this? It's a CT image, and I put it in brackets. I supplied that information. It's in sentence case, not italicized. And then I have the DOI. Now, this DOI format is the most recent one. APA 6 allows you to use the most recent or some of the older versions. Just be consistent, make a choice, and use it throughout your paper. Next, I'm looking at an image found on a website that is more like an image database. In fact, I'm going to go back a moment, just a moment, and I'm going to take a look at that Radiopedia entry, okay, just so I can show you the difference before I go on. Here, I'm going to shrink this up in case you're using images from here. It's part of this case, and there's a citation, and they have a recommended citation. That doesn't mean you use that, it's just how they're recommending it. But you take the elements that you need. Here's the DOI, here's the permalink. So the preference is if there's a DOI, use a DOI. But if you didn't have one in a source, you would be using the permalink. So let's just go back to our PowerPoint. And this time I am using one where I use the URL. Now, it's still the same basic format, okay? But notice I modified this one because there was no author, no title, or no date. So what do? Well, just remember we had author, date, title, format, and then the URL. When you don't have an author, you sub in the title. When you don't have a title, you make a descriptive title. And of course, I supply the information once again, so it's in brackets. The title is in sentence case, but it's not italicized because when you supply information in brackets, you don't italicize it. So notice that for the format, I'm including it right within the description, CT image. Here we have no date, and then we have the retrieval to this particular gallery. So let's take a look. Okay, so this is what it looks like when I followed the link. I was taken to a Google page and I linked out to this particular image. So it got me back where I needed to get back from, but there's no title. I don't know who did this. I don't know much except that it came from radiologyinfo.org, and my URL will take me right there. So that's how I would do that. That's how I interpret that. But now I want to go on and talk about when you actually do reprint it You put the image into your paper, you put the, or your poster, or you modify it in some way, but there's elements of there that have been reproduced. In that case, what you need to do is you need to label your figure. So images in APA are known as figures. You would type the word figure, italicize it, and then numerate it. So the first one that you have in your list of figures would be figure number 1. And then you would get, that's the caption. Part of the caption is this brief description, which serves as a title for this figure. If you need additional clarifying information, it would come afterward. And then after that, there's a copyright attribution and a permission statement. So we're not making an in-text citation here. When we're talking about our work, we're going to be referring to the figure. And this is going to give that actually very full in-text citation information. It looks a lot like the information in a references list, but it's formatted a little bit differently. And when we're using copyrighted information, we have to indicate that we got permissions to use it. But it has some sort of copyright status, and we have to share that. Now, before I move on, I just want to mention that there is additional information in the publication manual on radiologic imaging data. It talks about if you're using brain images and how to label them and describe them. It's beyond my personal scope of knowledge, so I'm going to suggest you go ahead and read that information. Now I'm just taking another closer look after the caption when we're getting to that attribution portion. Notice we're giving attribution, we're listing the exact part of the source. So we're not citing the whole journal article here. Notice that when we're citing the journal article, there's some formatting differences. So here's the title of the article, and it's in double quotations, and it's in title case. So that looks a little bit different, okay? But when you get to the references list, you're going to cite the whole journal article. Once again, you're going to cite it in a journal reference format, okay? But with this attribution being provided here, when we talk about this figure, we're going to refer to it as figure 1 in our paper. Figure 1 depicts the laser procedure. We're not using in-text citation. So here's an example of a template that's in the APA Style Blog 6th edition archive from their 4-part series on navigating copyright for reproduced images. And so I will link you out and we'll explore this. You can read through that, but this is how I got this format, and so depending on what type of source you have, it'll look a little bit different. But I just wanted to highlight that you situate it beneath the figure caption, you include the source information, and it's part 4 that gives you those templates. So let's just take a jump out and take a look. Okay, so here is that series. It's part 4 that has the templates. So just use the breadcrumbs on top. You could just keep going back. Here I am at part 1. That's where it links out to in the slide to get to part 2. Let's go this way. To get to part 1 is here. If I want to get to part 2, I just follow the breadcrumbs. Part 3, part 4. Okay. So here, notice that it's talking about if it's copyrighted or if it has a Creative Commons license. And it tells you to use the Creative Commons license abbreviation. Let's talk about that further. I want to talk a little further about determining your copyright status. First, determine if it has copyright. It might say something like copyright in the date or have that @ symbol to indicate copyright. If it's Creative Commons, it was created to be made freely available, and it will have a specific type of Creative Commons license. There are several of them. You usually note them by their abbreviation, so look for the abbreviation on the source. Public domain means that the copyright has expired and now it is freely available in public domain. And if you do not see a copyright, then you should make the assumption that it is copyrighted. So what we need to know here is that all of these require an attribution. So we're going to have that citation portion in the figure, and we're going to indicate the type of copyright status that we have, but only the ones under copyright yet are going to require the permissions. But there's exceptions to that, and the exceptions fall under two areas: scholarly publications and fair use. Scholarly publications, if you're using the work for using the source for academic work or non-commercial research or education, generally speaking, that is considered not to require permissions. You want to maybe check with the policy of the individual publisher. Journal publishers usually hold the copyright unless they're Creative Commons. But then there's fair use. Fair use is a very legalized term, and so interpreting it can be tricky, but some generalizations. If you're using it for academic work and non-for-profit, if it represents facts or data, not creative works, if you're only using a very small portion of that source, so define small, right? They don't really define that, but a small percentage. Usually it's a chapter in a book when we're talking about doing interlibrary loan, and that's the reason for that. But as well as like if it's going to hurt the actual market value of the source. So, you're asking yourself that question. But if it's not for profit in your academic work, you're going to be fine as well, under either two of these exceptions. So you won't have to go ahead and seek permissions under those circumstances for your classwork. And well, this sums up my discussion on citing APA images. These, again, are my interpretations, librarian Laura Rock. I have a disclaimer. I must say that students are responsible for their own interpretation. I'm just offering mine as a guide. I'm offering it with supports that I'm asking you to go back and look into the manual if you question the interpretation. When in doubt, I also suggest consulting your faculty and or the University Writing Center. But I hope this helps.